Well, Mr. Ray, thanks for sitting down with us.
Good morning, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I think there's a natural curiosity when it comes to any campaign and you don't get a lot of real insight sometimes in little sound bites out there. So I'm glad that you were able to sit down and chit-chat with me about your campaign and a little bit about yourself.
This is great. No, I look forward to it.
Let's start with a little bit about you. If there's somebody who just does not know anything about you, where'd you grow up, where you from?
Well, that's not unusual because I am a political outsider. I've not been in politics at all, so I'm not very well known. But I did grow up in Louisville. Now, I was born in Columbus, Ohio, so I always like to say I'm a Buckeye by birth, but a Kentuckian by the grace of God. And but I grew up from 9 years old on. I can answer the question, where'd you go to high school? I went to Ballard and grew up around here. And brief stint at University of Louisville, but then I had a passion to get involved in business, a business my father founded, Steel Technologies. So I joined that in the early 80s and worked 30 plus years there at Steel Technologies, and have grown my family, have 5 kids, married to my wife Michelle for 25 years, so I'm a Louisville kid.
What's the impetus to kind of take that experience and move it into Congress?
Sure. Yeah, well, I have been in business for really almost 40 years, and I saw literally at the beginning of this year, late last year, I saw the direction and the trends in the economy that are very concerning to me. Very similar to what my father experienced in the late 70s in the Jimmy Carter era. And I saw inflation increasing and skyrocketing interest rates and a lot of trends, and I knew it would jeopardize the economy and business. And so that's what really motivated me when I saw that Congressman Yarmouth wasn't going to run again. I thought I would get involved to try to help change the direction.
What's the campaign process been like? And I would ask that question in general because there's, like I said, a natural curiosity about it. But for you, for someone who is really taking this on from a grassroots kind of perspective, how do you start?
Exactly. I didn't know either, but we are a grassroots campaign. I didn't know how to move forward. I was a outsider as far as politics are concerned. But we've assembled a good team, and you reach out to people with experience, and I've reached out to Ann Northup, who held this job as a Republican a little over 16 years ago, and she gave me a lot of sage advice, and a lot of local politicians gave me some solid direction on how to get a campaign jump started. But literally filed myself and got moving in the right direction just really at the beginning of the year.
Well, when you mentioned the former Congresswoman giving me some advice, any of that you want to share? Like, did she tell you some things?
Well, she said, even she would say 16 years ago things have changed dramatically, but still grassroots efforts are still vitally important, and some of the fundamentals never change, and that's really getting to know the people in your district very well, getting your name recognition out for a businessman and a political outsider, and really doing the door knocking. Some of the old school campaigning still is very effective, and we do that on a regular basis.
So I kind of want to talk a bit about your vision for the seat should the voters put you in it, right? But I think we also have to acknowledge there is some level of mystery that a lot of people still have when it comes to Congress, right? Especially the House of Representatives, because there's so many people.
That's right.
And a lot of people might be confused on exactly what can you do?
Right.
What can you actually do in that role?
With 435 of my best friends.
I mean, people look at the House of Representatives sometimes like it is just this cattle call almost of just people running all over the place doing all different things.
And I visited Washington earlier this year, and that's not, it's very similar to that. It is very hectic. But at this point in time, as it relates to the direction of the country, I can make a lot of campaign promises, but the reality is this current administration, what I refer to as the Biden, Harris, Pelosi administration, Schumer, that's heavily involved, their policies are what I'm genuinely concerned of. The spending that's going on under Biden's administration, he's nearly spent $3 trillion. That's led to the recession and the inflation that we've experienced. That's led to what's the prices at the kitchen table. I mean, the grocery prices are out of control. Gas prices are still way too high. So those are the things that motivated me. So I could promise a whole slate of things. The reality is I want to slow down what I think is unsustainable spending and the direction that this administration is going.
And so when we move into the conversation about the issues that are important to you, that you want to tackle, I want to be clear at saying this is not a debate between us.
Yeah.
And this is just an effort to really get to understand where you're coming from. So I'm not going to be diving in as journalistically, intrusively as I could, but I will just ask some follow-up questions just so people have some level of clarity. So what are the things that you really think we need to dive in on?
Right. I do think, and again, when I hearken back to the experiences under the Carter administration, even though I was a young man, my father almost lost our business, Steel Technologies, during those policies. And now when we say we're at a 40-year high inflation rate, that harkens back to the late 70s, early 80s. And so inflation and how that's impacting the citizens of Louisville is my key issue. I think things are very unaffordable, whether you're talking about the prices in the grocery store or car prices that have escalated or gas prices. These are just unfair burdens on the citizens of Louisville. So the economy and the inflation is really one of my #1 issues.
So when we talk about that in those terms, I think a lot of people would say, yes, you are right, sir, that is a major issue. I think a lot of candidates on both sides of the aisle would say, yes, sir, you are right, that's a major issue. But I think the follow-up question that has to exist in this space is, what's your plan? You know, it's very easy to say inflation is a big problem and we got to tackle it. But what is your plan?
Well, obviously, I'm a believer that because of my party, I'm a Republican. I think that the Republicans will take control of the House. So the 400 and $750 billion spending packages that keep coming out at us all the time, if we're able to take control of the House, regardless of what happens in the Senate, I think we can slow or stop this unsustainable spending that's led to, even the Courier-Journal confirmed, $31 trillion in debt. These numbers are what's driving us into a recession. So as far as future spending and what I could accomplish is, we can't pass any additional spending, and we have to shrink the size of government and stimulate the economy. So I know those might come across as vague, but those would be bills and policies and procedures that I would support in Congress in Washington.
It also sounds too, it hinges on a shift in party leadership.
Sure.
If that doesn't happen, does that change your plan, or does it force you to go about it in a different way?
Well, I've always said I'll work with anybody. I've worked on some boards and commissions that were appointed by state government that were split up, sometimes the majority Democrats, often the majority Democrats. And I was appointed chair by a board that was 5-4, Democrat versus Republican. So I can work with either side. I've said if it's in the best interest of Louisville, Kentucky, I want to go to Washington, but with an eye on Louisville, Kentucky, and what's in the best interest here. Because although there's going to be serious national issues that we're going to face, even national security issues, I want to always be focused back on my hometown, because I think we all are in agreement. We need support and help out of Washington. I often lead with economic development. Being a businessman, I think that economic development is vitally important, and I would like to see a more balanced economic development approach in Louisville, significantly including the West End and the South End.
I think a lot of people would appreciate you talking specifically about the focus on Louisville.
Sure.
And when you mention economic development, what does that look like for you?
Right.
Especially when you talk about the balance between the different areas of the city. What does that look like for
well,
you?
I admire Governor Bashir bringing these big investments in the batteries development into Kentucky, both in Elizabethtown and in Bowling Green. But we need those suppliers. There's a lot of tier 1, tier 2 suppliers in automotive, and we've got a great automotive base. We have a great appliance base here in Louisville. But as far as automotive is concerned, we do have Ford, we do have Toyota, we have significant investment here. We could bring high-end, great-paying manufacturing jobs that are going to support these battery investments, and we could bring those economic opportunities to Louisville, inside Louisville, so we don't have to travel down to Bowling Green or Elizabethtown for a good paying job. We need those jobs here. And I think good paying jobs lead to good health care, they lead to good income, they lead to good housing opportunities. But you can't do that with service jobs, nothing against fast food restaurants or service oriented jobs. We need really good paying jobs, and we need a businessman to bring those to Louisville.
When you talked about being the outsider trying to move in, and much has been made about that in the last political cycles over the last several years, and a lot of people found value in that.
Yes.
And we were talking about getting to Washington D.C. and you sit down and start doing your job, and you just start learning all these things.
That's right.
that come with it. Having talked to Congresswoman Northup, and just having some idea of Washington, D.C., what surprised you the most about what the congressional representative from this district experiences on the job, has to deal with? Was there anything particularly that Congresswoman Northup told you that this might surprise you?
Well, it changes so much based on the party and who's in the executive branch. And so, Ann worked under a number of different presidents during her tenured area. So, and it also changes significantly whether you're in a house that's in the majority or in the minority. And so we're hopeful that we will be in the majority, and that'll help us not only accomplish some great things, but also sustain and kind of pump the brakes on what's going on in the unsustainable spending, as we say. So it's going to change dramatically. I was a little shocked by how you mentioned the fast pace and how crazy it was. It was. Unfortunately, under this administration, the schedules are very challenging. It seems like the Speaker of the House doesn't give a schedule that looks out in advance to where the Congress people can make sense out of their day and do other things for their constituents and plan committee meetings. It was very hectic, whether they were literally looking at their phone waiting to cast a vote.
It always feels to me like the Senate is like a Delta Sky Miles club in a nice airport, and the House of Representatives is like the E-terminal at Charlotte.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Either the library or the fraternity house.
Yeah.
And that was we walked, and again, I'm good friends with a couple of our congressmen, even Congressman Guthrie, who now represents part of Louisville. He was very helpful when I was in Washington. And we literally walked, when we were in the Capitol building, from the congressional wing over to the Senate wing, and that was the experience. I felt like I was going from the fraternity house to the library.
So what is it that you want people to take away from this conversation who might be seeing you for the first time? Obviously, your website has sufficient information on there, but what is it that you want people to know, particularly in this climate where control of the House and Senate are up for grabs at this point in this election, and this general polarized political climate that we have?
Right, and it is up for grabs, but the consensus is that we very well may have a red wave, and if we have that red wave, who would you think would be able to best represent Louisville, Kentucky? And that's where my focus is, and I think it's obviously someone in the majority that could work with the additional congressional delegates, that could work with our Senate delegates. I want to move things forward for Louisville, Kentucky. It's been 16 years of the past control from my opponent's side, from John Yarmouth's side, and my opponent, who I'm running against, I consider that he would be very similar to Congressman Yarmouth, and I feel like Louisville deserves a change. Things haven't changed for the better in the last 16 years. They certainly haven't changed for the better in the last 4 or 5 years. So Congress can have significant impact in its district, and I want to bring that impact to Louisville.
The last real question I have is on behalf of constituents and viewers, but partially on behalf of journalists also. One of the things that tends to happen with a number of political officials, especially in D.C., because we don't have physical access to them, right? Is sometimes it's very easy to feel that our level of access to you as the representative is limited. any willingness to commit to transparency and availability and reachability to local media?
Absolutely. I think that's vitally important. You have to stay connected. I'm representing Louisville, Kentucky if I get to Washington, so my focus is always going to be on Louisville. I've also announced that if I'm elected, an office of mine, a congressional office of mine, is going to be in the West End of Louisville. I want to make sure we keep a constant eye on improving and lifting up the West End and delivering on broken promises of the past. So I want to be accessible. I assure you, I would just say, try me. I assure you I'll be accessible to local media on a regular basis. I haven't turned down, of course we're campaigning, I haven't turned down any opportunity now, but just see, I won't, you know, I've got good friends in the media, and I would continue to want to be in contact with them because I want to communicate to them what's going on in Washington and how it's going to work to improve our community.
Mr. Ray, thank you. I'm going to reach out and shake your hand now, but I'm going to be very conscious. I've been so
Neither one of us want to spill the coffee.
That's exactly it. I knew, like, at the end of this, I was going to reach out and try to shake your hand, and the coffee's going to go all over the place, and it's going to be awesome for both.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you
nice
so
to meet
much
you.
for sitting